Mayor Ellis, all right, you took the initiative to take a city that had its own heritage and its own image and made some drastic changes by opening the doors of Bluffton, Indiana to be a more of a multi-culturally oriented community. What made you take that initiative?
Well, as so many decisions or so many activities, this was born of a crisis. We, several years ago, opened a business downtown, as we do quite frequently. We had the traditional ribbon cutting. And following that ribbon cutting, a picture of which appeared in the paper, I got, and the business owner got separately, a copy of that photograph out of the paper with a racist note at the bottom of it, unsigned, of course, as all those are. And having been raised in Bluffton, Indiana, which is a small community just south of Fort Wayne, and it's a community where people are pretty polite to each other, I had forgotten, if I ever knew, that there is still an underlying current of intolerance. We went from that to forming a committee of community leaders and business leaders to start working on diversifying our community. And frankly, diversity just couldn't take root. We couldn't get traction when we talked about diversity. And I think part of it's because diversity sometimes is code for race and race only when people think of that. I'm a board member of the National League of Cities, and our focus this year from our president, Jim Hunt, is inclusiveness. And what a difference one word can make. When we started talking about including people, that places a responsibility on individuals and on the community. Diversity is seen, rightly or wrongly sometimes, as forcing an agenda on somebody. We need to become more diverse, and here's what diversity looks like. Inclusiveness is a more personal thing. All of us can think about, Eric, some time in our childhood, if we are very old at all, and maybe the Reverend here is not old enough to remember this yet, but I suspect that's not true, when we have been excluded, whether it's because of our cultural heritage. For me, I was a real small child, so I was the last guy picked for the baseball team on the sandlot. And being excluded doesn't feel very good. And if we can get in touch with that as individuals and in a community, and then begin to look at where we systematically exclude people in our community, it makes a big difference. We're changing not only the face of a community then, sometimes gradually, but we're changing the heart and soul of a community too. And that's what prompted our inclusiveness agenda.
But you know, when you take that step and do that, especially when you're fighting, years and years of history, did everything go as smoothly as you had predicted?
Well, we're still in the midst of the war here, so we'll see. The response has been interesting. There's a book that was published last year called Sundown Towns that describes the phenomena across the Midwest especially, and a little bit in the South, of communities where there were either laws that prohibited African Americans from spending the night in a town, or where people at least thought there were such laws. Now, Bluffton's a community where everyone in town thinks that there used to be this law, but we searched the ordinances and can find no evidence that that was ever the case. But what's the difference if people all think that there's an ordinance in town that prohibits this? And hence the term sundown towns. And the longer I looked at this, the longer I realized that, we are probably fall into this. We were a poster child. We're actually mentioned in the book, as a matter of fact. I found out way later. And then what happened was, as we announced our inclusiveness agenda, people who are in their 80s started calling me, stopping me at church, emailed me, and said, let me tell you a story from when I was young. Let me tell you what I saw in our community when I was young. And it's not exactly right, but I felt like the child who just found out after he was 50 years old that he was adopted. Not that that makes any difference. I love my town, and a child loves his adopted parents, but he realizes that things aren't what he thought they were. My town wasn't Mayberry RFD. There was some hostility. Fortunately, I haven't seen much overt hostility right now, but I have seen some people who are very, very embarrassed, who lived through some of those times, who are very, very embarrassed and are ready to get to work.